A couple weeks ago, Marvel unveiled the upcoming slate of movies for Phases 4, which is about to end, and Phase 5, and also a bit of Phase 6, which altogether makes up the Multiverse Saga. Meanwhile, DC really just released a trailer for Black Adam, which we've gotten before, as well as a trailer for Shazam: Fury of the Gods, and then like 2 weeks later, canceled Batgirl. And things are not looking good for DC, but what if it was the other way around? What if Marvel was canceling the upcoming $70 million Spider-Girl movie, where DC was absolutely killing it with their cinematic universe, making almost $3 billion for Justice League Endgame, which capped off a 3-phase-long saga called the Nightmare Saga or the Apocalypse Saga, whichever one you prefer. Well, I made a video about this a while back, basically replacing every single MCU movie with what their DC counterpart would be, fitting it all together, or mostly taking inspiration from the Snyderverse from the DCEU, and seeing how a well-structured DC cinematic universe could look like, on par with the MCU. Now, I also made a spin-off video from that where I went over what the MCU would look like if it was messy and not well structured like the DCU, and a sequel video which went over Phase 4. But what that was a bit messy. It was basically just every single property and project that Marvel told us we were going to be getting, and seeing what that would have looked like in the DCEU. But not only are there things that I would change from my original video, but now that we have the actual lineup in the saga and what it's all leading up to, I decided to completely change. So basically that sequel video is completely irrelevant. It does not matter anymore, and the original video, there are also things that I would change. You still need to watch that original video to understand this one, just to get all of it, but just to explain the things I would change. Well, I would basically just get rid of the Birds of Prey movie because it doesn't really work with what we're getting in the next saga. There are characters from Birds of Prey that I would introduce as counterparts to those characters. So, and really the only reason I replaced Captain Marvel with Birds of Prey is because Captain Marvel's a woman and Birds of Prey is about women, but it's not that special in this universe because Wonder Woman has her whole trilogy from the very beginning. Instead of Captain Marvel this time around will be a Green Lantern movie, which was actually the replacement for Black Panther, and this time I decided to screw it with the whole having to have like the founding members exactly where their counterpart is. The Black Panther counterpart is going to be Aquaman, the sequel to the original Aquaman in 2008, called Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, because those movies, Aquaman and Black Panther, are just too similar to not count it. And finally, I would just change the name of the Wonder Woman trilogy ender, which was the Thor Ragnarok counterpart. I think I called it Wonder Woman Gods and Mortals. Instead, I'll call it Wonder Woman Paradise Lost, because that fits way better with being a Thor Ragnarok counterpart, and it's also, honestly, a cooler title. But that's basically it for the changes I would make, so let's go right into Phase 4, starting off the Multiverse Saga with the replacement to WandaVision, which is basically the exact same as it was in the initial sequel video. So the counterpart to WandaVision is a Martian Manhunter TV show, which is a really cool idea I had of John waking up in a bed next to his wife on Mars, having no recollection of being a Martian Manhunter or the Martian Genocide or the Justice League, and he accepts this paradise until the cracks start to form. He starts to remember things, and he realizes he's under the influence of a Black Mercy, which, if you don't know, is most famously from the Superman story for the Man Who Has Everything, which is also a fantastic episode of Justice League Unlimited. But the Black Mercy combined with his mind powers also had the dangerous effect of affecting others around him, which also becomes a very similar conflict to what WandaVision did focus on. And throughout the show, he would be in this false reality, trying to figure out who did this to him, who was like the villain of this whole season. And maybe like near the end he gets out of it and then tries to track down that villain, but it's revealed that it was no villain. There was no villain in the story. It was Martian Manhunter himself who gave himself the Black Mercy, feeling lonelier than ever after the events of the Justice League Endgame movie, which I'm pretty sure I called Final Crisis, and also after like everything he's been through throughout its entire life. He finally chose to just put himself under the influence of the Black Mercy, and there were some grave consequences to that because it did affect others around him, not just himself, which would kind of make him morally gray and a bit of the villain of his own show like Wanda was. Plus, he also has like very similar powers to Vision, so he's kind of the counterpart to both of those characters. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier would be the exact same basically as it was in that initial sequel video, as it would focus on Tim Drake as Robin. It would also just be called Robin or Robin and the Red Hood, whichever one works better, becoming Batman after he was chosen to take up the mantle after the last Nightwing movie, and it would also have a lot of influence from Batman Urban Legends Cheer, because that's one of the best Red Hood stories, and that's basically what Red Hood's part of the story will mainly focus on. But in the end of this show, Robin, aka Tim Drake, does become Batman, leading into Batman 4, which we'll get to later. And now we get to the biggest deviation from that initial sequel video, and that's the counterpart to Loki. Now that we know what everything is leading up to, we know it's leading up to Avengers King Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars, I already know what the counterparts to those will be, and just to spoil it, because we kind of have to for you to understand basically all the things that we're going to do up until then, it's basically going to be a two-part Crisis on Infinite Earths movie, because I think that's the thing that fits the best in something called the Multiverse Saga. And Loki is the TV show that basically kicked off the multiverse in the MCU. It kicked off the whole saga. So here, this will be the same thing. This will be a pariah TV show, who is one of the most significant characters in the initial Crisis on Infinite Earths comic book, and also in the crossover event in the Arrowverse. The show will show the multiverse's origin story. It's not something that didn't exist before this saga, or in the initial saga, like in the MCU. It's just not something that we ever saw. But we do see Krona witnessing the dawn of time, something that was forbidden, which caused the universe to become unstable and diverge into an infinite multiverse. And then billions of years later, a scientist named Kelmosa, which is Pariah, makes the same mistake, going back in time into the dawn of time, witnessing the dawn of time, which causes the multiverse to become unstable and creates the antimatter universe, and that also creates the Anti-Monitor, which is going to be the big bad of this saga. The King counterpart of King is going to be the big bad of the Multiverse Saga. Then the Anti-Monitor is the big bad of the DC version of the Multiverse Saga, because, like, who else would it be? In the show itself, though, Pariah would go to other universes. In the comics, his main thing is just going to other universes and witnessing their destruction by the Anti-Monitor, which was like his punishment for unleashing the Anti-Monitor. But this show would have some sort of story. I mean, they come up with some crazy story for Loki. I'm sure a competent version of Warner Brothers creating the DC universe could come up with an interesting story for this as well, beyond just unleashing the Anti-Monitor, but maybe the whole season to lead up to the finale, which is where he actually unleashes the Anti-Monitor. I think that works. So then there's the Black Widow movie, with its counterpart being the Flash, the fastest man alive. That might be a bit confusing because these two characters couldn't be more different, but Black Widow and the Flash were counterparts throughout the entire saga, both having no movie, both being founding members, and both dying in the Endgame and Endgame counterpart. And also, it fits here because the Black Widow is about Black Widow being replaced by the new Black Widow, while here it's the Flash being replaced by the new Flash, and I think it does work, even if these two characters are completely different. But this movie is called The Flash, the Fastest Man Alive. It stars Wally West taking over the mantle of the Flash, and with the huge shadow that Barry cast, Wally doesn't think that he's as good as him or as fast, which is a big focus of Wally's comic books in the 90s, which is a fantastic run. And one of the best stories there is the return of Barry Allen, which deals with Barry Allen returning, but also acting a bit different from how Barry did act, so Wally does suspect this, and in the end, it's revealed that it's actually Eobard Thawne, aka the Reverse Flash, who would be the main villain of this movie. And in the end, Wally breaks through the mental block of surpassing his mentor to become, you guessed it, the fastest man alive. Also, we would get flashbacks to Wally's time as Kid Flash, with Barry Allen coming back for a couple scenes, because we did get Natasha Romanoff in the Black Widow movie. In fact, she was the main character. This would be a bit different. It would make a lot more sense for Wally to be the main character, as it would have made more sense for Yelena to be the main character of a Black Widow movie coming out after Endgame. So that's what we're gonna go with here. So then there's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which I'm making a Blue Beetle movie because I like Blue Beetle and I wanted to get a movie, and he's getting a real movie in real life next year. Hopefully it's not canceled. Please don't cancel that movie, Warner Brothers. I really want to see it. The costume just looks so cool. Then there's the Eternals, with the counterpart having to be New Gods. I mean, it has to be. The New Gods are connected to Darkseid. The Eternals, at least in the comics, are connected to Thanos, and there isn't really another group of godly characters like them. I mean, it's pretty obvious that these two are counterparts, but the main characters would be Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, and Orion, with the main villain maybe being Grady Goodness. Then there's a Hawkeye TV show, which you would think would be Green Arrow, but I'm making a Cyborg TV show because Cyborg is Hawkeye's counterpart, and I'm saving Green Arrow for later because I think he fits really well a lot later. So Cyborg's in this, Wally West is in this because Elena was in Hawkeye, and also, I mean, you have a second Hawkeye in Kate Bishop, which there isn't a second Cyborg, so instead, bringing in a character who is very much associated with Cyborg, and that's Beast Boy. Plus, Jericho would be in this TV show, who's the counterpart to Maya, because he's really the only deaf character that I could think of from DC, but also it fits really well because then Deathstroke would be the main villain, and he would be the counterpart to Kingpin, which actually fits really well with what I'm going to be doing later with Daredevil, which I'll get to when I will. But this TV show, if you couldn't tell, is very much inspired by Teen Titans, and you got Cyborg, Beast Boy, Wally West, Jericho, and Deathstroke. Really, the only thing you're missing is Nightwing, and then you really have a Titans team. But the thing is, we don't really get anything in the MCU that can be replaced by the Teen Titans or the Titans until we finally get a Young Avengers movie or TV show. Until we do, though, this is the closest that we'll ever get to there being a Teen Titans TV show in this version of the cinematic universe. But speaking of Nightwing, we move on to Spider-Man No Way Home. Up until this point, all the Spider-Man movies have been Nightwing movies, and this will be no different. This movie will be called Nightwing Shadow of the Bat, and I went into depth into what I think this movie would be in that last video, where I went over Phase 4. But basically, it is a multiverse movie where instead of Nightwing meeting up with different versions of Nightwing, because there aren't really any other versions of Nightwing that people like at the very least, he will be meeting up with other versions of Batman, including one played by Christian Bale, one played by Michael Keaton, and since Robert Pattinson would not exist as Batman in this universe like at all, because it's more based off the DCEU, the DCEU was successful enough where they didn't need to reboot it with the Batman, I would bring in also Ben Affleck's Batman, but an alternate universe version of that, not the one who died in Justice League Final Crisis. The whole thing is about Batmite basically not being satisfied with the idea of Tim Drake taking over the mantle of Batman, and he wants Dick Grayson to be the new Batman. So he messes with the reality, he peers into the multiverse, bringing in those other versions of Batman so that Nightwing can team up with them, be inspired by them, and want to be Batman again. But obviously it doesn't go Batmite's way, but it does go our way because we do see those three Batmen fighting together, and also Nightwing is there as well as the main character, and they would all be fighting against all of the villains that appeared in all of those movies, or all of them that they can get, because I'm sure that would be super expensive to get all those super famous actors for no real reason. I mean, they could just bring 5 of them like they did in Spider-Man No Way Home, but in the end, Batmite is either defeated or more realistically convinced that maybe Dick Grayson is better off as Nightwing and not as Batman. So then there's the Moon Knight TV show, with it being replaced by Peacemaker, and the main reason that these two TV shows are connected here is because the two main characters have the exact same backstory of their brother dying and their parent blaming them for it and basically abusing them either physically or emotionally or mentally throughout their entire lives until they become an emotionally unstable superhero. So yeah, I think that it's a really good replacement, although Moon Knight is a lot more self-contained than Peacemaker is, so Peacemaker, although would still reference the rest of the DCU because it would be a completely different show if he didn't. The Justice League don't actually appear in the final episode, which, while a cool moment, it doesn't really work for the self-contained nature that Moon Knight was going for. So then there's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and this actually works a lot better this time around because now I've seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and in my initial video, I mean, it was hard to make a Shazam movie as big as Multiverse of Madness seemed to be, but looking at the movie, he didn't really go to that many universes, so I think that we could just go to one other universe, and this is really one of the first movies that delves into the multiverse as well, other than like the TV show Pariah and Nightwing Shadow of the Bat. This is the third project, much like Doctor Strange's Multiverse of Madness was, in this movie, which is called Shazam Champion of Earth 5. And by the way, it has to be a Shazam movie because Doctor Strange's counterpart in the initial saga was a Shazam movie, and basically these two characters are counterparts now. But this movie has Shazam and Flash team up, leading to Billy being sent across the multiverse with no way back, basically because while he doesn't really understand the full lengths of his powers, he unlocks multiverse travel, something that in this universe Barry never actually did. Billy finds himself on Earth 5, which in the comics is where Shazam comes from. Well, it's kind of Earth S, actually, but that never really made any sense, so it's just going to be Earth 5, which is what it was renamed later. But Shazam actually comes from a different company altogether than DC. DC purchased them, but they stayed on their own universe until Crisis on Infinite Earths brought the universes together and Shazam became a main DC character. But this would flip that on its head, where initially he was a main universe character, but because of the events of this movie, he gets trapped indefinitely on Earth 5, a world where Freddy is Shazam, Freddie Freeman that is, he's the main Shazam, and Mary Marvel is actually evil, which is something that she has been in the comics, which I wanted to because Scarlet Witch was the main villain of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so I wanted to make a female hero the villain of this one as well. Even if Martian Manhunter is technically Scarlet Witch's counterpart, that just wouldn't work at all. But the big twist of this movie is that Billy actually never finds his way back to the main universe. He's stuck on Earth 5 until Crisis on Infinite Earths, or at least until the next Doctor Strange movie, if there is one, before the next Avengers movie in Phase 6, which is entirely possible, but that movie will also have a lot to do with the multiverse, I'm hoping. Then there's the Miss Marvel TV show, which would have a connection to the Captain Marvel counterpart, which at this point is Green Lantern, but then it would just be called Green Lantern because it would be about a different Green Lantern, so I'm separating it here from the Marvels completely. Instead, it's about Stargirl, who I feel like is a very similar character to Miss Marvel, as that she is a teenage girl, and she is a big fan of superheroes, and she's super ecstatic about becoming a superhero, but it's basically just the first season of the CW, or I guess then it was the DC Universe Stargirl TV show, with really no differences. Plus, this would connect a lot more to the Multiverse Saga, as Stargirl does take place on Earth 2, and also it would introduce the Justice Society of America, who are very prominent, and the universe is very prominent in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So then there's Thor Love and Thunder, with its counterpart being Wonder Woman 4. Now I initially called Wonder Woman 3 Wonder Woman Gods and Immortals, but I changed it here to Paradise Lost, so I'll just call this one what I called the third one in the initial video. So this is going to be Wonder Woman Gods and Immortals, which is a really cool title, and the title of a Wonder Woman story. I'm pretty sure it's her origin story on New Earth, which is not what this would be about, but it's just a cool title, in my opinion. But this movie, I don't really know what it would be about. It doesn't really matter all that much. I mean, I guess Cheetah could be the main villain. It could introduce Yara Flor and kill off one of the Wonder Girls, because, spoiler alert, Jane did die in this movie, and she is one of the Thors. But in the end, it wouldn't really matter all that much, because this movie would probably suck, because, let's be honest, Thor Love and Thunder was not great. So next up is the She-Hulk Disney Plus show, with there not really being a clear counterpart for She-Hulk in the DC Universe. I could have gone for something associated to Aquaman, because the Hulk's counterpart, at least in the first phase, was Aquaman, but nothing really fits there. I could have gone for a fourth wall-breaking character like She-Hulk, like Ambush Bug or Animal Man, but instead I went for the lawyer side of things, because this show is called She-Hulk Attorney at Law, so I think the lawyer part is the one that is the most important. So this TV show will be about Manhunter, which is Kate Spencer, who is a lawyer for metahumans by day and vigilante by night. And with Daredevil showing up on this show, I think I'll reveal who the Daredevil counterpart is. And it's going to be Green Arrow, and I'll get to that when I get to the Daredevil TV show in Phase 5, and I'll delve into why I think it should be Green Arrow. Then there's Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which I want to take the opportunity to say the trailer was fantastic. It got me so excited for a movie that I was not really all that excited for prior to the trailer, but this will be the third Aquaman movie. It's a bit different from the MCU because this is only the second Black Panther movie, and Aquaman is the counterpart to the Hulk, only had one movie. But like I said earlier in this video, I changed it up a bit. I strayed from the formula just a bit, so that the Black Panther movie is actually a second Aquaman movie, and this will be the third Aquaman movie, but it's something that I will not stray from is what Wakanda Forever is about, which is a new Black Panther taking over after the death of the original due to the unfortunate circumstances of the actor dying in real life. So basically this movie would be about Jackson Hyde, or Calderon, whichever one they would go with, taking over the role of Aquaman from Arthur Curry, who died sadly off screen because the actor, which I guess would be Jason Momoa, died off screen. Again, in this alternate universe where DC is competent at all. So Jason Momoa, I guess you could thank DC for being completely incompetent. And capping off Phase 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday special, with its counterpart having to be a Suicide Squad holiday special as well. which I'm calling Suicide Squad Bloody Christmas because I think that's a cool title. But after Justice League Final Crisis, where the Suicide Squad did help out saving the world, and in that movie, they actually get freed from Amanda Waller and Argus because they were heroes in the end. Basically, like their final Suicide Squad mission, where the ones who survive do get the reward of getting out of prison. Now they team up for this one time where it's different from the first two Suicide Squad movies. Instead of being controlled by Amanda Waller over threat of death or reward of getting out early, here they're just meeting up because they're friends or they used to work together and they were in life-threatening situations together, so they bonded. And here they're just a group of characters who meet up on Christmas and things go awry very quickly, and maybe a couple of them get arrested in the end, but I think it should all lead into the final Suicide Squad movie, where my idea is the former members of the Suicide Squad from the first two movies and this new Suicide Squad that Amanda Waller puts together for the third movie, they fight, and in the end, basically the main villain is Amanda Waller, so the former members of the Suicide Squad try to take her down. And that's basically the entire plot of the third movie, so I don't really have to go over it when we do get to it in Phase 5. So next up is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, with its counterpart being the Atom Thunderbirds of Cord. Now, I know what everything is leading up to now. I know that King's counterpart is the Anti-Monitor, so that means that the Anti-Monitor will appear or at least have some sort of role in this third The Atom movie. I'm calling it the Thunderbirds of Cord, and not really including the Anti-Monitor that much because I think that would be way too crazy. But we do have a bit of the antimatter world. We do meet the Thunderbirds of Cord, who are a group of characters who work for the Anti-Monitor, who are all from Cord, which is actually where the Anti-Monitor is from as well, in the antimatter universe, which the Atom somehow gets to because of some part of his suit going wrong. He does find himself in the antimatter universe, and he fights the Thunderbirds of Cord, and in the end, just like Shazam, he does find himself trapped there, which basically sets up his role in Secret Wars / the King Dynasty. He's in the antimatter universe in those movies. So then there's Secret Invasion, with his counterpart being the crossover event Invasion. We were told recently that Secret Invasion is going to be a crossover event. I'm not really 100% certain what that means. We do know that it will have a War Machine, and it will have obviously elements from Captain Marvel with the Skrulls and Nick Fury, so I guess that it is crossing over a couple different properties. But does that mean that there's going to be a bunch of superheroes? Is it going to be like an Avengers level threat where there's a bunch of superheroes teaming up? I don't know. We don't know yet. But for now, we do know that Nick Fury will be in it, we know that Maria Hill will be in it, we know that War Machine will be in it, and also the Skrulls will be either the main villains or framed as the villains like they were in Captain Marvel. So here we have Amanda Waller and Argus in place of Nick Fury and Hill, and I guess representing that part of it. And instead of War Machine, we have his counterpart from the first saga, which is Supergirl. And I guess you could also have Superman in here, because I honestly didn't kill him off, I didn't send him off anywhere. He's still around, he's still flying around, he's just not really all that prominent anymore for some reason or another. But I guess you could say that Supergirl and Superman are both in this TV show, fighting the Dominators, who want to drop a metahuman killing bomb, just like they wanted to do in the comics and in the Invasion Arrowverse crossover. Then there's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is Suicide Squad Volume 3. You already know what that's about. Just to add, though, we know that a couple Guardians will die in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I think Drax and Rocket are pretty high possibilities. The deaths of Suicide Squad members is not really that big of a deal in this trilogy, but I think Harley Quinn dying in this movie would probably be a big deal, considering how big of a character, or profitable of a character at least, she is for Warner Brothers. Killing her off, I think, would be pretty ballsy. Following that up is the Echo TV show, the spin-off from Hawkeye, which I said earlier will be the Jericho TV show. It will also feature Deathstroke as the main villain, which is the counterpart to Kingpin, and Daredevil will be in Echo as well, so Green Arrow will be here as well. I guess Deathstroke and Green Arrow are like the main rivals here, like how Kingpin and Daredevil are in the MCU. And I know Deathstroke isn't really 100% a Green Arrow villain, and it's really just the Arrow TV show that made it so in that show. But Deathstroke fits so well with both Cyborg and here with Jericho, and I think Green Arrow fits really well with Daredevil. And, Deathstroke has a rivalry with Green Arrow at some point in the comics and in, obviously, the Arrowverse. But all those things are a lot more relevant for the Green Arrow TV show, which is going to come up when the Daredevil show comes out. For now, though, this is the Jericho show with Jericho as the main character. You could also have Grant Wilson and Ravager in here as well. But Jericho would definitely be the main character, just like Echo. So then there's Loki Season 2, with its counterpart being, obviously, Pariah Season 2. Now, I don't really necessarily know what Loki Season 2 will be entirely about, but the season starts off with the Anti-Monitor being released, and Pariah begins his punishment. Although he doesn't really, go to a universe right before it's being destroyed, he maybe spends some time there, starting with Earth 3, the world of the Crime Syndicate. Throughout this entire season, we see the Crime Syndicate with Pariah somehow on Earth 3. We see Owlman, Ultraman, Superwoman, Power Ring, Johnny Quick, and maybe a couple of others. They could be played by the same actors as the Justice League, but they could also not do that because that would be a bit crazy. But that's basically what this season will be mainly about, unless Loki Season 2 is about a completely different concept, in which case, I guess I would have to change that. So then there's the Marvels, which is the reason I made the Captain Marvel movie a Green Lantern movie this time around, because I think it works really well here, with that one being about one Green Lantern and this one being about a trio of Green Lanterns. The one that is the focus of the first one would be Hal Jordan, with this one being Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart, and Guy Gardner, a trio of Green Lanterns teaming up to fight some sort of threat. And this movie could either be called Green Lanterns or Green Lantern Corps. The latter is probably a bit cooler. So then there's Blade with his counterpart being Constantine. They're both in the supernatural side of the things, and they both had a movie in the early 2000s, although Blade had a movie in the late 90s as well, and he had 3 of them. But I think these work well as counterparts, and the movie could be very similar to something like Constantine's City of Demons, or something like that. Then there's Ironheart, who is very similar to Steel. She's a bit more similar to the Natasha Irons version of Steel, but we haven't actually seen the John Henry Irons version of Steel yet. So that's what I'm going with here, and Superman appears in this as well. Then there's Agatha, Coven of Chaos. I have no idea why this is being made. I have no idea how it fits into the saga or why they're making it. So instead I'm making this a Zatanna TV show. Instead of making it a TV show about a villain, it's going to be about Zatanna. And I guess that can connect to the Blade counterpart Constantine a little bit later down the line. I really wanted to see a Zatanna TV show in here somewhere. I wanted to see Zatanna in this universe somehow. And Agatha being a purple witch of sorts, Zatanna fits that really well. And that brings us to Daredevil Born Again, and as I've said up until this point, the counterpart to Daredevil has been Green Arrow, with this being called Green Arrow the Emerald Archer. Now the situation here is that basically there was a TV show in 2015 called Green Arrow, not called Arrow, it's called Green Arrow, which lasted 3 seasons, and it was fantastic. The first season was fantastic, the second season wasn't as good but still great, and the third season was absolutely insane. But then it was unfortunately canceled because Netflix didn't really want to make these TV shows anymore, and it didn't exist for a while, but the fans really wanted it to come back, and it finally did when Oliver Queen appeared in Nightwing Shadow of the Bat. Then he also appeared in Echo, and finally he's getting his own TV show, Green Arrow the Emerald Archer. Now you might be wondering why I decided for Green Arrow to be Daredevil's counterpart. I mean, Green Arrow's a lot more similar to Hawkeye in abilities wise and weaponry, and a lot more similar to Iron Man in origin story, but obviously those two characters are already taken in terms of counterparts. But also I think there's just nothing in DC that is similar to Daredevil. He's a very unique character in that regard, and considering these two heroes are both street level heroes who had TV shows around the same time, I decided that in this alternate universe where DC is competent and Marvel isn't, they would swap. So like Daredevil has his 8-season TV show on the CW with a couple good seasons but also a couple bad ones, and Green Arrow had a 3-season TV show on Netflix. All 3 seasons are fantastic, which is basically just Arrow season 1, 2, and 5, but seasons 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8 never happened. The Arrowverse never happened, or it's a lot smaller. It's the Netflix series, so it's like 5 of them and like 1 crossover. And now Daredevil, or this time around Green Arrow, is coming back in 2024 with Green Arrow the Emerald Archer. Then there's Captain America Brave New World, which is the 4th Batman movie this time around, with the new Batman, Tim Drake, finally getting his own movie. This movie will be called Batman and Robin. Reborn. I was gonna call it just Batman and Robin, but there's already a real-life movie called Batman and Robin, so I added Reborn to it because I think that that sounds cool, and like Batman and Robin haven't been around for a while in this universe. And now they're back with Tim Drake as Batman and Damian Wayne being introduced as Robin, where Tim Drake has finally embraced his new role as Batman along with his new suit, which is actually inspired by the Batman Beyond suit because Tim Drake was Batman Beyond for a bit. In the comics, everything seems under control until Talia al Ghul returns, revealing to Tim that she has a son with Bruce. Tim takes Damian in and teaches him to be a hero, turning him into the next Robin, with Ra's al Ghul as the main villain. The main inspiration from comics is the Batman and Robin comic book with Dick Grayson as Batman and Damian Wayne as Robin, with a bit of a twist with Tim Drake instead, as well as the 2015 Batman Beyond run where Tim Drake was Batman Beyond. And finally, we do have the Thunderbolts movie with the counterpart. I mean, the Suicide Squad and the Thunderbolts are the exact same concept, but the Suicide Squad is already the counterpart to Guardians of the Galaxy. So instead, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on the multiverse here. I think the DC's version of the Multiverse Saga would have a bit more multiverse in it than the MCU version of the Multiverse Saga will, it seem, have. This will be Freedom Fighters, taking place on Earth X, with Uncle Sam and the Ray, Phantom Lady and Black Condor, Dollman, and a couple others, with Overman, Overgirl, Blitzkrieg, Black Arrow, and all the rest of the Third Reich or the New Reich as the main villains of this movie. And then, obviously, all these characters are introduced into the main universe through Crisis on Infinite Earths at the end of this saga. And that brings us to Phase 6, where it all culminates to. Now, we don't really know much about Phase 6, we only know the 2 Avengers movies and Fantastic Four. And I'm sure I could update everything and make an entirely new video just about Phase 6 when everything is officially announced. But for now, I'm really only going to be going over Fantastic Four, Avengers the King Dynasty, and Avengers Secret Wars, starting with Fantastic Four, which will also connect a bit more to the multiverse than I think this movie will, with its counterpart being the Justice Society of America, which I think is the clear counterpart to the Fantastic Four, just with a lot more characters. We have like the ones that we're going to see in the DCU, like Dr. Fate, Hawkman, Anisfatcher, and Cyclone appearing, but we could also have Wildcat and Dr. Midnight and Green Lantern and Hourman and The Flash and a lot more. All of which set on Earth 2, the same world that Stargirl was set on, but this time with a bit more characters and a bit more focus and exploration of the universe. So that brings us to what it all led up to, Avengers the King Dynasty, with its counterpart being Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1, and then Avengers Secret Wars, his counterpart is Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2. Now, I was considering a couple titles for one of them being different from the other, like maybe the first one could be one of the titles of one of the issues of Crisis on Infinite Earths. The best one I think would be Justice League Oblivion Upon Us, or maybe I could call the first one Crisis on Infinite Earths and the second one Infinite Crisis, but Infinite Crisis is kind of a completely different story. And I don't think Oblivion Upon Us is as cool of a title, so I just think, considering these two movies are as connected as they are, and considering these two movies are coming out just half a year apart, I think it's more than justified to call them Part 1 and Part 2, with the first one ending with basically the whole multiverse either being destroyed like how they did it in the Arrowverse, or the multiverse being combined into one, and then Avengers Secret Wars is its counterpart, Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2, deals with them being on a new universe and having to take down the Anti-Monitor once and for all with the full might of this one singular universe, which is actually the combined force of a couple different ones, including Earth 5, where Shazam comes back from. The Atom comes back from the Antimatter universe. This also would include Earth X, which is where the Freedom Fighters are, Earth 2, which is where the Justice Society is, and a fifth universe replacing Earth 4 because all those characters already exist in the main universe and don't really have anything to do with the multiverse this time around. And I don't really know what that fifth universe would be, but let me know in the comments down below what you think it should be. What should that fifth universe be, and how would it bring something new into the new universe that's combined and created in Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2? Now obviously I don't know who's going to die in Secret Wars or in the Kang Dynasty, but I think that the biggest deaths here should probably be Supergirl and Superman. Superman just because he's been around for so long, and these characters are tied down to actors, so I doubt Superman's actor would still be willing to renew his contract for after Phase 6. So Superman could have a pretty big death here, being replaced by John Kent, going into a potential Phase 7. But Supergirl should also be killed off here, also because she's been around for so long, but also because she had the biggest death in Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comics, other than Barry Allen. But Barry Allen we already killed off in the Endgame equivalent, and I don't think they should kill off the next Flash, Wally West, anytime soon, even if in the comics there is that recurring thing of Flashes dying in every crisis. But basically, these movies would be the Arrowverse crossover event, but much bigger budget, that is for sure. A lot bigger in scale, and a lot more comic accurate, including all of the necessary DC heroes who are still around in this point in the cinematic universe. But it could be very similar in concept, like the cliffhanger in episode 3 of the crossover can be translated like the exact same to the end of the first part, where there's this big twist where instead of the 5 remaining universes combining, the heroes completely lose, just like how they did in the Infinity War and its equivalent, where the multiverse is completely destroyed, and there's also like a ragtag group of heroes who are around in some sort of non-multiverse related place, like the Dawn of Time. The Vanishing Point I don't think would exist in this universe, but the Dawn of Time definitely works, and how it's associated to the Crisis. And that group of heroes somehow, with the help of probably the Spectre, who could be any number of characters, but could also just be Jim Corrigan, reshape the universe, with the last couple of universes that were around combined into one, and that is the beginning of part 2 as well as the end of part 2. So that's just what part 2 is about: reshaping the universe, defeating the Anti-Monitor, and saving the world. You might have noticed, however, that I didn't go over any of the animated shows that Marvel announced and are developing over the next couple of years, and that's because it seems like they distanced the animated shows from the main saga. Like, what if Season 1 was a part of the Phase 4 slate, but then Season 2 wasn't a part of the Phase 5 slate, and neither are I Am Groot, X-Men 97, Spider-Man Freshman Year, or Marvel Zombies. And it seems that's because they aren't in the main timeline. They're all in the multiverse somewhere, but not in the main MCU. So they're not like a part of the sagas, but they do exist in the multiverse. So I'll go over what I think each one should be briefly, but I won't go in depth onto any of them. Also because this video is way too long already. But there's What If, with its counterpart being Elseworlds for seasons 1 and 2. So I Am Groot, which is coming out in like a week, probably is already out by the time I'm releasing this video. The counterpart will be King Shark, which I'm calling actually King Shark is a Shark, since I Am Groot is named after what he says. King Shark is a Shark is what he says in the DC animated movie universe, so I'm going with that, because otherwise this show would be called Nom Nom, and then King Shark wouldn't even be in the title. So King Shark is a Shark is basically just set in an alternate universe. It's 5-minute shorts, five 5-minute shorts, about King Shark going on some random adventures, and I chose King Shark because he is the most Groot-like character in the Suicide Squad, which is the counterpart to the Guardians of the Galaxy, being a character who really only says 1 or 2 things. It's a CGI character, and a fan favorite at that as well. So then there's X-Men 97, the continuation of the 1990s X-Men TV show, which is arguably the least connected thing to the MCU out of any of the animated shows, and its counterpart is going to be the Teen Titans 2006 TV show, and a continuation of that. The reason I chose Teen Titans is because basically Teen Titans is the second biggest superhero group in the DC universe, like the X-Men are to Marvel, and both teams are completely absent from this cinematic universe. And I think it fits for the Teen Titans to be the X-Men's counterpart going forward, which is not what I said earlier of Young Avengers being Teen Titans' counterpart, but we don't actually know if a Younger Avengers TV show or movie is going to happen. And I think that when the X-Men do arrive, there isn't really anything big enough at DC to be their counterpart, aside from the Teen Titans. So basically, mutants in this universe is the counterpart's going to be sidekicks, or Titans. Even, you know, there are some sidekicks here or there. The actual Teen Titans aren't going to arrive until the X-Men do. So then there's Spider-Man Freshman Year, with his counterpart being Robin Year 1, which is slightly different. I guess it's in an alternate universe like Spider-Man Freshman Year is. And finally, Marvel Zombies, with its counterpart being Deceased, which is also, it was an episode of Elseworlds Season 1. So what I'm doing here at the end is something that I didn't actually initially do in the video, and that's include all the TV shows and movies that have been confirmed by the MCU, but weren't in the official slate for one reason or another. This includes Armor Wars, which is a Supergirl show, Wakanda, which is an Atlantis-related show, which I'm making Tempest, who's the original Aqualad, a Wonder Man show, which I'm making Captain Atom, because I think that's the most similar DC character, Nova, which I'm making Booster Gold, because I feel like it, a Deadpool 3 movie, which I'm changing up a bit here. Instead of it being a complete new franchise, I'm giving The Flash a sequel. I don't think Black Widow will ever get a sequel, and I want The Flash to get one, and also Deadpool is connected to the X-Men, and Wally West is connected to the Teen Titans, at least in the comics. Shang-Chi 2 is Blue Beetle 2, Eternals 2 is New Gods 2, and obviously the mutant-centric film, like I said earlier, is a Teen Titans movie. So that's it for this video. That's what the Multiverse Saga of the DC Universe looks like. It could also be called the Crisis Saga if you want to call it that, but the Multiverse Saga works just as well, as it is all about the multiverse, and it's really only at the end that it's about the crisis. But that is what it's all leading up to. That's what it is all about. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What would you change, and what do you like, what do you dislike? But if you do like this video, make sure to leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. I do appreciate it. Bye bye.